Time keeps on leaving and we keep on moving. When do we pass on our wisdom to the youth? My veteran story, lost arts discussions, fireside chats with a bourbon or two. It's time to hear the stories by military veterans. Get yourself ready. It's the Lost Arts Podcast. The Lost Arts with Andrew Cox. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Lost Art Podcast. That podcast has given a voice to our veterans. On today's episode, we bring back Marine veteran, Master Gunner Sergeant Retired Joe Davilla on the program and to discuss his veteran story. But before we get into my veteran story segment, are you enjoying the podcast? Then consider being a TLA patron. That's the Lost Arts patron. It is with donations that we are able to continue recording these podcasts and getting our veteran community's voices out for all to hear. Just go to the Lost Art website and click on the Become a Patron link. Any donations is appreciated. And if you would like to be a guest and tell your veteran story, then email me at thelostartwithandrewcox@gmail.com. Again, that's thelostartwithandrewcox@gmail.com. Hey, Joe, welcome back. How you doing?
Awesome.
So we left off, you had gone to Okinawa, 3rd Marine Division. And you, after that, or if there's anything else you want to talk about there, you can, but where did you end up going after 3rd Marine Division?
Yeah, so I was at 3rd Mar Div. I had been through, right before I went to Okinawa, I went to the Master Sergeant Symposium, and Sergeant Major Carlton Kent, Sergeant Major Marine Corps at the time, he had come through and he had started talking to us about this program, the Congressional Fellowship Program. And, I was really interested in that. So, I like politics. I like policy. I like debating, that type of stuff. So, it was something that perked my interest. And, it kind of planted a seed that probably about 4 years later, I started really trying to execute on. So when I was leaving Okinawa, I put in for the Congressional Fellowship and, first time didn't work out for me. I didn't get selected. I didn't get an interview, nothing, right? So, it was kind of a sting. I was a mass sergeant, at the time and, I was approaching 20 years and, my wife and I had been discussing, whether we should stick around past 20 or get out.
Right.
So at that point, I was like, let's go to Quantico. There's a lot of probably, jobs for me on the outside if I did decide to retire there.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to Marine Corps intelligence activity there. And it was a great tour. Again, awesome leaders at the unit. I was there for about a year. I was in their analytic tradecraft section. I got to travel and meet a lot of different people while I was there. Kind of taking analytic tradecraft that had been kind of long, hard learning through the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and trying to codify it in doctrine or analytic tradecraft techniques that we could use later on down the road in the future.
Right.
It was a good time, but probably about 6 or 7 months into that. I started thinking hard about, like, do I stay in or do I get out? Should I stay in until I get a look for Master Guns or, leave? My wife, she kind of, put some pressure on me. She's like, you applied for it the first time, that fellowship. You didn't get it. So we're just stopping after the first time now.
Throwing the gauntlet.
Yeah. So, I was like, that's kind of where I made my deal to myself. Like, and I tell this to a lot of folks as they're approaching 20. If you feel that sticking around the Marine Corps past 20 is for you, do something or find something in a message or something, that you would do, that you would go past 24. For me, it was the, fellowship program. So I did. I applied, second time around, and I got selected for the interview, and then I beat the interview, and I wound up getting selected for the program overall. Very and that, cool. Kind of took me past, the 20-year mark. I knew I was going to have to reenlist to finish that program out. And it was a excellent, it's one of the hidden gems, I think, for enlisted, Marines that are out there. If you're interested in politics or thinking about working on Capitol Hill or would like to see how the legislative branch works, that is, graduate level, awesome education and programming, for you. So, it was an excellent tour.
Wow. And what would you say, like, when you're looking at that? Because I'll be honest, I don't know much about that whole political realm up there and stuff like that. So, what was kind of eye opening for you as you were up there? And really also, what types of things did you do while you were there?
Yeah, so the program's kind of tiered, right? So like your first, and this is I don't know how they're running it now. I think there might be a little bit of a change,
Hmm.
but I left MCIA in October, and then from like October to the end of December we did training. So I got to go to George Government Affairs Institute at Georgetown University for a few classes on legislative process and things of that nature. Like literally my second day at the Pentagon at OLA, they brought us in and they're like, hey, we're going to get some classes on the mock, right?
Hmm.
The Marine Operating Concept at the time, and I thought to myself, well, they're probably going to bring some planner in that's going to talk to us about the mock, and
Yeah.
we get seated around this conference table, attention on deck. The commandant walks in,
Oh,
and he's
no
like, hey, let
kidding.
me tell you. Yeah, let me tell you about my plan. I was like, wow, this escalated quickly.
Yeah.
Like I was just down in Quantico in a whole building, and now I'm in the
Yeah.
Pentagon getting briefed on the mock. And then he's like, hey, I'm going to have a rep come in and talk about some aviation things. And next thing you know, DC, the Deputy Commandant for Aviation came in,
Yeah.
and started talking about, aviation stuff. And it was just a different, world. And I, was, blessed to be exposed to. I never, thought that I would be in, those types of situations and those
Right.
rooms, with folks at that level. But it was amazing. So, get done with that training. And then, we did the Library of Congress, did some training events for us, and then we got assigned to our member representative we'd be working for a year.
Right.
And I wound up working in the member office of he was assigned to House Armed Service Committee, and that was a great assignment. It was new to me because I wanted to be in the old guy in the office.
Hmm.
When I walked in the office, I think the only person who was my age there might have been the chief of staff and the member himself.
Oh,
Everybody
really?
else was, 20s, young folks. And I don't say that disparagingly either. They were probably motivated in a way I hadn't seen up to that point.
Yeah.
When you're in the military, you're around other folks in the military, and you just get really used to seeing passionate people about military service, about their jobs, about the things they do.
Yeah.
I had never seen a young person passionate about education. I had never seen a young person like passionate on veins and spit, passionate about like industry, right?
Yeah.
Or the economy until I went to that office and I saw people doing battle in those realms, right? Like
Uh-huh.
education policy, industry policy, things of that nature. And I was like, they're, and again, this is nothing, the military is amazing, right? And I'm part of that, but seeing young people that motivated about those things, it made you just really sit back and say to yourself, like, this is why we protect our country.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah. Yeah.
freedom. There are people who are really, we're a hard outer shell to a really gooey middle. And from time to time, we strife, we fight with each other.
Hmm.
But at the end of the day, that military is a hard outer shell, but there's a lot of amazing stuff going on inside that I got to see. The other just surreal thing about working on Capitol Hill is that I got a badge for the Capitol, and I could go anywhere I wanted to in that building with that badge, right?
Oh, wow.
Folks would, the tourists would come, they'd go through and see things, but I was able to, like in the evening times, walk through Statuary Hall.
Wow.
I was able to, go and, to the rotunda, right, and look
Hmm.
up and actually take my time and see our history, America, right?
Wow. That is
I go
cool.
to Statuary Hall, and, on one end you see Jefferson Davis, and on the other end you see Rosa Parks looking down her nose right across at him, right?
Yeah.
And you just see, our history for our country come alive in that way. It is an amazing experience. So that was fun. Um,
Wow.
Out of all the things I was able to do on Capitol Hill, I would tell you that the thing that meant the most to me, and I got to meet a lot of cool people. I got to do a lot of cool things. I flew around, but there was one, guy. I handled a lot of constituent issues,
Hmm.
and we got a phone call that came in the office. It was a retired colonel, and he's like, "Hey, Vietnam vet. And he's like, hey, when I was a lieutenant in Vietnam, my doc, he did something amazing, and all he got was, a low level, award for it. And I wanted to get upgraded. I thought that I wrote him for a silver star, but he never got that silver star. And I want to correct this. And,
Wow.
when you're working in that environment, there's a lot of things that you could do. There's a lot of things that you don't really, but I saw that and I was like, I could get this done in a year.
Yeah.
And I kind of, pushed myself. I was like, I'm going to do this, right? This is going to be something that I can, going to be happy with, at the end of this year.
Right.
So it took me probably about 5 or 6 months of going back and forth with individuals. But so long story short, this guy is out messing around near some tunnels and stuff, and wound up being a precursor to an ambush. He got shot and blown up, and this doc darts out from the company perimeter, and jumps on top of him, starts treating him. At the same time as there's an ambush kind of flowing over the top of them into the company perimeter, right? So he's shooting back. He's like doing all this stuff. They finally get the guy back, and that was it. So he wound up leaving. He got an award for it, and after talking to some folks, we were able to put together another package to see if we could get the thing upgraded. And probably about 4 months later, the clerk for the office comes to me, and he's got a FedEx box, and I jiggle it around. I was like, "What's this?" I open it up, and Silver Star falls out with a new citation, and I was like, "Did it? We did it!" So I got it back. I got the award back out to the colonel, and they were just about to have a reunion. So they were able to award the doc the medal, in front of his family. The guy he saved was there. So that was, pretty awesome, to see come to fruition. So again, that was, if I were to think about it, just all the stuff that we were able to do, that was something that I was able to kind of play around with personally and kind of get across the finish line. So I was really happy with that.
Wow. That's an incredible story. I mean, that's got to be rewarding now when you look, you open the package, right, and that silver star falls out. I'm sure you're like, oh my God, it happened,
Yeah, it was like, this is, I use the term a lot. It's escalated quickly. I wasn't expecting this to just pop out of a box, but I guess that's the way it's delivered now. Right?
Yeah,
so, we were able to get the award out to the guy in time, and Doc got his medal, and it was it's just a trip because I look at, our generation of folks and we, going through Iraq and Afghanistan and stuff. And, some of the heroism that we've seen, from our generation of folks and even the younger generation of folks that have been through, all of that, to see, these Vietnam guys back in, when I was out in, on the Hill, it was like 2016 time frame. Just to see them after so many decades, like, this is wrong and we need to fix it and you need to help me. I'm like, okay. I got you. Let's do it.
Well, it's good to know that there are people out there that are trying to make things right, and they're bringing it to Congress and everybody up on the Hill, and they're trying to say, hey, these things need to be fixed. That's part of America. It's very important. What type of advice, like if you were going to talk to, let's say, a young service man or woman, and they're looking at possibly doing something like that, what type of advice would you give them?
Well, the first thing I'll tell them is apply, because a lot of folks have great intentions and they have ideas that they want to do something, but then they'll wind up talking themselves out of it. And it drives me crazy because I see talent, right? Folks are like, hey, I thought about doing that. Well, stop thinking about it and do it, right? Put the package together. You don't, I'll probably not be able to make it. Well, let a board determine that, right? Let somebody determine that for you. And I tell folks, street kid from New York, right? Wildly not qualified to do a lot of the things that I've been able to do, but right. I've never had this inhibition, about not applying. I've always I'll have somebody tell me no, right?
Yeah.
And I apply for these things. So that's the first thing. A lot of folks are like, how'd you get to go do that? Well, it's an opportunity available to everybody. Just apply. Mm-hmm. And if you apply, you might actually get selected. So, that's the biggest thing I tell people. The other thing I would say, especially about, working on, on Capitol Hill is it kind of goes back to some of the other things we've been talking about earlier in the podcast where, you got to be flexible. Mm-hmm. I showed up there and again, I was, man, I want to say I was early 40s at the time when I was there.
Okay.
Um, most of the folks in the office, again, passionate, awesome people. I enjoyed working with every one of them. They were a lot younger than me, and I had to figure out how I could adapt myself to that environment
Mm-hmm.
because nobody worked for me. In fact, I was a fellow, so they were I worked for them,
Right.
and showing up to that environment. I came home one night. It was like 2 or 3 days after starting working there, and folks were talking about TV shows or whatnot. And I was like, I looked at my wife and I was like, what are we watching tonight? And we were trying to figure out what to watch. And I was like, why don't you put on, The Bachelorette? I think that was it, right? And
Right.
she looked at me. It's like, you want to watch The Bachelorette? And I was like, I don't really want to watch The Bachelorette, but I have a good feeling that the folks in the office are probably going to be talking about this tomorrow. So at least I'll have something to talk about, right? And so I watched it, right? Go in the office the next day, and definitely, like I predicted, like one of the folks in the office, like, did you see who got a rose last night? I was like, yeah, it's crazy. Why don't you give a rose to him? And and everybody's like, Joe, you watch The Bachelorette? I'm like, I sure do.
Uh,
Right?
Making
But
connections.
yeah,
That's
but
good.
funny enough though, like yeah, as the year rounded out there, that office, they were kind of like a family to me. It was great. I still get calls from a couple of them. One of them's getting ready to get married here soon, invited me to the wedding. One of them came down my retirement ceremony. And it's just amazing to see how folks, this is 2016, so 2024, have folks' careers progressed to the point where they are now. It's awesome.
Yeah, that's really cool. And now, when you were up there, you're saying a year, so you spent a year with that office. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, there's a year in the office, and then there's a 2 year like kind of payback assignment that you have to do. And right around the man, I want to say it was like September timeframe. I was like, I've got a payback assignment that I've got to do. Where am I going to do it? And I had reached out to a friend of mine at Defense Intel Agency, and they gave me the opportunity to go work over there for my follow-on assignment. And I was the House and Senate Armed Service Committee liaison for DIA for about another year and some change, in the Beltway. So I was able to see both sides. I was able to see kind of the legislative branch side of things, and then I was able to do the government affairs side where we were interacting on behalf of the agency with Congress, which was also a really cool experience.
Wow, that is really neat. Um, and I'm now, were you briefing things? Were you anything like that? Or you just helping prep and moving things around for them type of deal?
Yeah, so yeah, I kind of call it, the best party planner on the face of the earth, right? I was definitely not the subject matter expert for a lot of the things that we were coordinating, but for the most part, if the Hill had a information request on something, I would help coordinate it through the agency SMEs,
Gotcha.
and then vice versa. If we had something we had to tell the Hill, I would coordinate that through the SMEs
Okay.
and the director back through the thing. I got to do a couple of hearings and prep folks for those hearings. One of the things I tell PFCs when I was back at DAMNEC is I would show a picture of me sitting behind agency director at a hearing, and I tell them all these things, and they're like, "Wow, you did a lot." And I was like, "Yeah, but, I'm not telling you that for my sake. I'm telling it for yours, because when I was a PFC sitting in this classroom, I had no idea. Fast forward 20 years, 2 decades, I would be like riding in a convoy heading to Capitol Hill with an agency director as they're about to brief, a posture statement, right? Like I had no
Right.
clue that that was in my future. I couldn't even string together a paragraph if you asked that lieutenant back at 10th Marines. So, I tell folks that, there's definitely a learning curve. And if you stick around, the Marine Corps long enough, you're going to have opportunities that you never even saw coming, come your way. So it's been a great, it was definitely a great career. But
That's
yeah,
really
it
cool.
was awesome time.
Yeah. Oh man. So all right. So you did your time there, and then where did you go after that?
Went to so right around the time I was finishing up there, my wife and I were looking at like, okay, what's next, right? Do we stick around? Do we get out? And there was an opportunity that had been getting cultivated by some of the senior enlisted leaders at DIA to look at putting a senior enlisted Marine at the Indo-PACOM J2,
Oh wow.
which is a 2 star billet
Hmm.
there. and they didn't have a senior enlisted advisor there. So I threw my hat in the ring for that. I was brand new Master Guns at
Okay.
the time, and I threw my hat in the ring for that. And I interviewed with the general at the time, and I got selected. And came home from work that day with kind of some luau gear for the kids, just to let them know we were moving again.
Right.
And yeah, a couple of months later, we wound up in Oahu. So that was a quick turnaround too. I got selected for that in November, and we were wheels up to go to Hawaii probably by January. I forget exactly when in January it was, but I do. Do you remember the false missile alert that happened on
Oh yeah, yeah,
Hawaii?
yeah. I do remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was in an airplane at about 30,000 feet that day. I don't remember exactly what day it was, but I do remember that I got a text, Modern Marvels in Connectivity, right, on the airplane.
Wow.
There was a news alert that came over. It was like, hey, Oahu's about to get bombed or something like that, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And,
yeah.
my wife and I looked at each other as we're heading to Oahu, and I was like, I don't know, this plane didn't skip a beat. And I was like, well, I guess, we're going to land someplace, right?
Yeah.
But wound up being obviously, thank God, a false missile alert. But that
Yeah.
that was my introduction to the Pacific Theater.
Oh
It
man.
was pretty cool time to be out there.
I think they were just knew that you were coming, and they were like, he's like a missile, right? So they just decided to go ahead and throw it out there. So how was your time in Hawaii?
It was a great time. I feel bad saying this because you've asked me that multiple times. I have not had a bad tour. I can't say I have. I mean, there's been challenges here or there, but usually the people are what get you through things. Hawaii was the tour itself was a bit of a challenge because I was kind of in a billet that we were still trying to figure out where we were going to go with it.
Right.
We were able to get it solidified, the bill of description put to it, and then probably about year after I left, it actually got solidified as a permanent, Marine Corps master gunny piece of structure in the Joint Force. So that was really,
Wow.
that pumped me up. I was happy to see that. And there's probably been about three or four folks after me that have sat in that seat now. So it was a great
Yeah.
time. But I couldn't think of a better time to be in the Pacific Theater. Doing the job that I was doing, there was a lot of different adversaries floating around out there. We went from a false missile alert that we thought North Korea had launched, as I'm on a plane, heading out there, to
Hmm.
great power competition, as I was leaving, and all the things associated with that. It was a, excellent, time to be in the Pacific Theater. The people I worked with, I, I would say the, the Joint Force is an amazing organization, right? Just being a part of a joint force, and a lot of times as Marines, we are, and rightly so, we're very proud to be Marines, right?
Hmm.
But being a senior enlisted leader in a joint organization, I got to take part in a lot of different traditions that I didn't necessarily know about, or really were not cognizant of, up until the point of getting there. Watching airmen sing the Air Force song, right? Like
Hmm.
we sing in Marines hymn, seeing, soldiers getting promoted and some of the things associated with that, seeing, chiefs go through chief in doc and the things that are
Right.
associated with that. We definitely are part of a great, Department of Defense and a great armed force. And, it really, if where my appreciation for our country and just the way our founding fathers set up our government was amplified when I was on Capitol Hill. I think my time with the Joint Force really solidified, how we fight, just the different services what everybody brings to the fight. It was an amazing time to be out there.
Yeah. Very cool. And what advice do you have for Marines going into that joint environment?
Uh, Drop the ego. Uh,
Hmm.
we're Marines, and I think that a lot of times that can overpower. Yes, as we walk into the Joint Force. The Joint Force loves its Marines.
Yeah.
I had PFC showing up, working alongside senior government folks, senior civilians,
Yeah.
working alongside other service members. But coming into it, I think we definitely have an ego associated with us, and if we can take that and some parts of it, I think it's not really fair,
Yeah.
because the assumption is that we're Marines and we're going to show up with an ego. I
Hmm.
ask people to dispel that when they show up, right? Like, just show you're awesome, by how you work and how you get the job and the mission accomplished, and
Right.
you will never have to say I'm a Marine.
Yeah, very true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's good advice. Dropping that ego. Uh, I know a lot of Marines have a problem doing that, but some not so much. So it just kind of depends on that. All right, so let's see. How long you were 3 years out in Hawaii?
Yes.
3 years. All right. And did you do anything on your off time out there? I mean, I heard I've not been stationed out there, but I've heard there's a lot of surfing, those types of things. Did you get out there and on your surfboard and have a good time?
So it's really hard for me because a lot of times I'll use my I'm an inner city kid, right,
Hmm.
excuse, but I haven't been an inner city kid probably for about 27 years now, right? So,
Right.
but the reality is like me and water don't get along,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
So my wife is great. She was out there boogie boarding. The kids got out there. They loved being in the water. You know, my wife went out and learned how to sail, right? Like
Oh,
all
nice.
that stuff. My hobby is definitely reading books, and like I enjoy doing that sitting on the beach with a mai tai.
Yeah,
So that was a good time for me. That was a wild night for Joe
yeah,
Davilla,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Other people, I'm sure they had other really extravagant hobbies, but the weather was amazing. We did a lot of hiking.
Uh-huh.
We did a lot of waterfall searches, a lot of mountain views and things of that nature. So it was a great time. The thing that kind of hampered it for us at the end was COVID. So
Oh,
COVID
yeah,
started kicking off my last year there. We had tried to make a habit to get onto every island in the chain, out there. We've been to, a couple of different islands while we were there,
yeah,
but we were not able to get out on our vacation the last time just because of COVID. And that
wow,
also constricted a lot of the trips that I was supposed to go on as well,
yeah,
for just business and stuff. Yeah,
yeah. COVID messed everything up. I'm telling
it did. It
you.
did.
Yeah.
We screwed a lot of things up.
I think with some things are probably still recovering from it. To be honest with you,
Yeah.
it's it was definitely one of those crazy times. I was at Pendleton and I was getting ready because I had to drive down to Miramar because I just got transferred down there. That was right when COVID was hitting. So I was living on Pendleton, driving down, and I just remember because everybody's like, "Oh, traffic's going to be horrible" and all this other stuff. And uh, COVID hits, and my traffic was pretty much nothing. There was no one on the road, which was fantastic. Um, but still, the drive kind of sucked just because it was so far away. But it was pretty cool. Nobody on the road. I guess that's a positive thing from COVID.
Yeah, it sure is. So, I would say this, like, I'm an introvert, right?
Hmm.
I'm a forced extrovert because sometimes I have to do, as a senior enlisted, I had to get out and do speaking engagements and things of that nature. But,
Right.
my natural operating environment is usually in my home, with a book, a glass of scotch, or, just, that's relaxing to me. So COVID, when people would say, "Oh, we've got to stay home," like, "Oh, darn." You're telling me I don't have to interact with people today? Like I can stay at home and decompress and just chill. Like, all right, I can do this. Like it was a great excuse just to be my normal self.
Yeah, that's awesome. Hey, speaking of like the introvert versus extrovert type of thing, um, and you're saying you're an introverted individual, so what type of advice would you have for people? Because sometimes the Marine Corps introverted individuals have a rough go because they're not as outgoing as a lot of the other Marines, and some Marines are obviously very outgoing, extroverted, and they just kind of they they thrive a lot of times in the Marine Corps environment. What advice would you have for the introverts? I mean, you obviously have done very well for yourself throughout your career.
Yeah, I definitely, if you're an NCO or a young Marine and you're introverted, you don't like public speaking, you don't like doing stuff like that, I empathize with you. I don't like doing any of that stuff. This is even a stretch for me right now, right? But I would say this, like, the way to break out of that is, and I go on a B billet, right?
Yeah,
Drill instructor duty, recruiting duty, you're forcing yourself into an uncomfortable situation, but it's a controlled uncomfortable situation where you're actually brought up and mentored on how to do those jobs. And as you're being
right.
brought up and mentored, those things that make you nervous ultimately will start going away. So if you'd have asked me at the beginning of my career as a young, PFC, if I wanted to get up in front of 88 people and teach inspection arms, I would have told you no. Like, no, I never want to
Right.
do that. Right? Why would I want to march a platoon and sing song cadence? Like, never would I ever want to do that. Right?
Yeah.
But after about 2 years, 3 years doing that and doing it well, you start developing a muscle that you might not like to flex, but you have it.
Right.
And as you go throughout your career, it's the gift that keeps on giving later on in your career, right? So again, while my natural state might not be public speaking, I can do it. But then, like most introverts, I need to go find myself a hole to go climb in and, decompress by myself and relax and,
Right.
but it just is, it is what it is. But that's the best advice I would give somebody who's kind of going through that. Find things that force you in a comfortable environment to work that muscle, exercise that muscle, and eventually it'll become really strong. And when you need to use it, it'll be there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great advice. Great advice. I know, like I talk to a lot of Marines and they're like, oh, I don't feel comfortable doing it. And I do the same thing. Like, hey, just throw yourself out there. I mean, you're in a controlled environment. Nothing's really going to go wrong here. So just try. And, they usually eventually they get used to it or whatever. I guess not everybody does, but for the most part, I would say. Let's
Yeah,
see.
just because it's not comfortable doesn't mean you can't do it well, right?
That's
Like,
true.
and I think, as I've grown up, public speaking, it's always been like that. If you get up in public speaking, you don't have the butterflies in your stomach. I gotta ask, like, are you doing it right? Like, is it something that's important to you? Because if you're nervous, that's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
And I'm a grown person here, probably at the height of my career, towards the end. Every time I had to get up and talk, I still had that moment of like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm a little nervous now. And being nervous is good. It shows you're alive, but it also
Hmm.
shows you care. Because if you didn't care, you wouldn't be nervous.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. Yeah. Very true.
Yeah.
And I would say like, I'm a musician. So, uh, even today, for me, getting in front of somebody and playing a musical instrument, incredibly nerve wracking. Like
Yeah.
that to me, and I've been doing it for years and years and years. But still, it's just nerve wracking. I don't know if anybody ever gets in front of people and plays that isn't nervous. I mean, good for them. I've never got there. That's for sure. But, all right. So, after Hawaii, what was your next adventure?
Yeah, so would be where I came to retire. So Dam Neck,
Okay.
when I was here as an instructor the last time, there was senior leaders here. There was a lot of different folks, and I was always told myself that I thought the most important job in the Marine Corps intel field was the instructor, was the senior enlisted at Dam Neck.
Yeah.
Just because the amount of people you get to, be around, the amount of effect you could have on the community, if you're engaged, and the amount of effect you could have on people. So coming back to Dam Neck was a great bookend to an awesome career. And it was a chance for me to kind of talk to these young Marines about some of the stuff that I was able to do.
Hmm.
Again, when I was open contract as a 17-year-old recruit, right? And the only thing I thought about was just getting into the Marine Corps. I never would have thought that I'd be rolling around in Nepal with the Indo-Pacific Command J2 at a conference, right? Like I never thought that would be a thing for me. So I used to really like to tell my story to the Marines to kind of give them an idea of what being a Marine is about, especially within the community that they were about to be part of.
Right.
So, I really enjoyed doing that. And that's what brought me back here. That and, I love Hampton Roads. It's a beautiful area here.
Hmm.
My family, my son's in high school. So, this was the place we wanted to get them through high school and kind of settle down.
Right. And then as a senior enlisted here at your schoolhouse, what were some things that one challenging, and then two just some positive things that you saw happen while you were there?
Uh, you know, the challenging aspect I would say is this generation of folks, and I don't think this generation of folks is a challenge. I think it's how we as senior leaders adapt this generation.
Hmm.
I've seen, just like you, I've seen like four different generations come through. I've seen my own. I've seen, the Iraq War 2001 generation,
Yeah.
go through recruit training. I've seen the 2007, 2008 generation come through Intel school. And then, now this generation. And this generation reminds me a lot of mine. I was a 90s kid.
Hmm.
I went to high school in the 90s, and I look at a lot of these young folks coming through, and they're looking for the same thing I did back in the 90s. There's no war that's going on right
Yeah.
now that we're actively like in. A lot of them are looking for a trade, something to be a part of, something to believe in. GI Bill, right? So I really like this generation that's in, because I know, just like my generation, right? You Gen Xers, the next time we have a war, you guys are going to be the downfall of us. Like, well, little did
That's
we
right. Yeah.
know that, 9/11 was right around the corner. And I think this generation is being recruited for a mission, right? And a purpose. This is
Hmm.
like a cyber generation. This is a space generation. This is everything, information that my generation is not.
Yeah.
And, so, as I look at these cats and dogs coming through, I was like, this is great. This is the next generation of Marines. Although I call it a challenge, I don't think it's a challenge. I think it's also the best thing that we've got going on. So you asked me a positive and negative. I would say they're both the same.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
It's how we're adapting to this new generation that I think we really, as senior enlisted, have to check ourselves on, especially in the environment. The drivers for them are, I think they were the drivers for my generation, right? And how we articulate that is going to be, the biggest thing for them. I also really liked and enjoyed talking to individual Marines on a personal basis, right?
Yeah.
I was probably more engaged than most. I've walked the halls, slowly listen to people talk, not afraid to have a conversation with the PFC. And I think that we as senior leaders, if we want to retain and recruit, we have to be personable with folks and tell them how we got to where we are so that they can figure out how to chart a course for themselves, which is, as your podcast is, I guess, a lost start in some
Yeah. It is.
cases.
Yeah.
I would really, beg, our generation of senior leaders to figure out how to do that for their Marines.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And you bring up the lost arts, and I would say that a lot of times we'd have issues, or I know I have a hard time relating kind of to that newer generation, and maybe not relating to. I don't know if that's, but how do I have that conversation with the newer generation? Because the way I speak and the way I do things obviously shaped it through the Marine Corps, right? And it's changed over the years. Man, that is really difficult sometimes to really have those conversations with those young Marines. Obviously still need to do it, but it's just hard to relate. The whole technology thing, they'll talk about all kinds of crazy stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I got nothing. It's
Yeah.
beyond me. I've got nothing. I'm surprised I'm
So
able to do what I'm doing right now with this podcast. I'll be honest with you.
I'll give you an example. And it's not even this generation. This is like the 2000, 2008 generation, right? Excuse me, 2007, 2008 generation. When I came to the schoolhouse, there was a lot of, young Marines getting in trouble and stuff. And, I kind of was trying to figure out what was going on. And, the Marines had uh, TVs in their rooms, but they weren't allowed to have cable. And some of the Marines
Right.
had cell phones, but they, were kind of unrestricted study hours where they couldn't use their phones. And, I kind of was kind of, boggling my mind. 'Cause, these are grown people, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they're 17, 18, 19-year-old, and we're telling them that they're going to have a gun and defend their country. But, they can't have cable TV in their room. Like,
Yeah.
so, and I look back at my generation, like, what did I do when I woke up in the morning at Jam Neck? Well, I'd get up, I lived in a squad bay. We'd make our racks. I'd go
Yeah.
to the chow hall, and then we'd go sit in the little communal, lounge, right?
Hmm.
And watch the big screen TV. MTV was on, right? Pearl
Yeah.
Jam, Nirvana, whatever, right? And, that was my generation.
Hmm.
So if you took that big screen TV away from me and then restricted the use of the payphones in the barracks, like, what would I do? Well, I'd probably get in trouble.
Yeah, very true. Very
Because he
true.
goes through crazy. So, I think, when I took over, I was like, hey, look, I want to let them have cable TV and, this internet thing, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Can,
yeah.
can we let them, have their computers and stuff? And, they were able to get their stuff back. And, my NJP rates went down and, 6105 rates went down. And that was important to me because I don't like sending folks out,
Hmm.
in their careers with, stuff like from Schoolhouse that I think we could have prevented. But I would use that as an example for this generation as well. Like, there's a thing, right? I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
For me, I was able to figure it out. I think a lot of it was just this generation. They're social beings, and they're
Hmm.
information beings, and the being able to answer the Simon Sinek, start with why.
Hmm.
For this generation, I think is kind of the nexus of things, right? So,
Yeah, that's a good point.
I really would hone in on that with folks, like, why are we doing X, Y, and Z? And I found that if you tell people why enough when you can, in that point where you really need to pivot quickly, if you've invested in them the ability to talk to them like adults and tell them why, that when you need to kind of execute quickly, they'll trust you, right?
Hmm.
There's speed and trust, right?
Yeah,
So, and then you'll be able to move. So, I don't know. That was kind of like my approach to things.
yeah,
It worked for some and didn't work for others, but I, I've enjoyed my time. I enjoyed my time working, with the Marines, and really it was the way I wanted to end my career, was being around, the folks that kind of motivate me,
yeah, yeah,
to
yeah,
kind of
definitely.
continue on with my career. Yeah.
So, I just got to say there's one thing that I've kind of honed in on with you throughout our conversations here, and that boils down to you had no bad duty stations, right? And and I guess I want to ask, like, from your standpoint, like, why is it you think you had no bad duty stations? Is that a frame of mind that you have, or was it luck of the draw just where you were at? What do you think?
Oh, I mean, okay. So no bad duty stations. I think it's a frame of mind because there's definitely been experiences that were unpleasant.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Right, right. There's definitely been unpleasant experiences, right? But at the end of the day, I think, for those people who are having experiences, right?
Hmm.
Usually those experiences don't relate to the Marine Corps at large. They relate to leaders, individuals, right? Maybe some people
Hmm.
that might be in the path that are just not, like, you're not clicking, right?
Right.
But there are a lot of other people to click with.
Hmm.
So click with them.
Good
Being
point. Yeah.
miserable is a state of mind, right? Don't just sit there and fester, right? There are ways to, move beyond it. I think for me, and it's something I tell a lot of the young folks that, might be struggling, especially, I would tell them three F's, right? Friends, family, faith. I've
Yeah.
had some of the best friends I've had in the Marine Corps, right? I've had, my family has been 100% supportive of me, and, the faith aspect of things is probably the biggest one because that's where a lot of us derive hope, right? And
Right.
if you're going through a hard time, you usually rely on that hope that the next day is going to be better.
Hmm.
For some of us, they might find that in a faith group. I did, right? Some folks might find that on the long run. Some
Hmm.
folks might find that doing yoga, whatever it is that makes you come to peace with yourself and have a brighter day the next day, do that.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
you also will not have a bad duty station. You might
True.
have
True.
crappy experiences here and there, but you're not going to have a bad duty station.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. It does boil down to relationships, in my opinion. Like, you look across the board, you can, and state of mind, right? You can go into a place and say this is going to be horrible, or you can go into a place and say this is going to, like, well, it is what it is, but I'm going to make it the best. And then you look left, look right at the people around you, and you make connections. And
Right. And
that to me is what makes it.
you're right. And some of the places that I've been to that I thought, well, I would say some of the places that I've been to that people have told me were going to be miserable, horrible places to go,
Right.
right? They actually wound up being some of the best duty stations that I've had.
Yeah.
So I would include my first one in that, for intelligence, going to an artillery unit is not necessarily, the creme de la creme of intelligence,
Right.
but I learned how to run a staff. I learned how to work amongst very senior people. I learned how to run my own office. I
Hmm.
learned how to administrate things to the point where that experience, where a lot of folks are trying to get on Muse and things of that nature coming out of the schoolhouse, that one experience helped kind of propel me into other chief billets that I've had, all the ways up through master guns.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't trade that for a world. Was it the place that was Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, the place I would have wanted to spend my first? I don't know, but I wouldn't have it any other way now. Is
Yeah.
what I say. And if I were to, again, no bad duty stations, some experiences maybe not so pleasant, but I have no regrets would probably be the other aspect of that. There's nothing that
Yeah.
I look back on and say, gee, I wish I would have did X, Y, or Z. It's never really kind of flashed to me like that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Very, very good way of looking at things. And that's something that I think everybody could grab a hold of from this and, start looking at what they're doing and try to make themselves have no bad duty stations, right? Um, one thing I do want to talk to you about, because if I'm not mistaken, you joined the VFW recently. Is that
I
correct?
did.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So, I wanted to talk it because now we're beyond the Marine Corps career because that's, you retired out of, Dam Neck here. You're moving into another career outside of the military kind of. And, we're talking about community, right? The people around us, those types of things. So the VFW, Marine Corps League, you have all these different organizations that you can become a part of. And I think a lot of veterans, once they get out and they move, like maybe not, we're concentrated here, right? A lot of military in this area, but you move somewhere like back where I'm from in Oklahoma, and not near as many veterans.
Yeah.
So how important are those organizations?
So I think, I'm been woefully inadequate in participating in VFW things. If I'm being completely honest with you, when I was looking to do my VA processes, the VFW, the caseworker that handled my claim was a VFW caseworker,
Hmm.
and she actually approached me because I had told her that I was looking to use another organization, and she kind of gave me a look like, would you like me to take a look at your stuff? And I was like, sure, I appreciate it. It was a TRS transition seminar. She had just given
Yeah.
us a class on, VA. And, she came to me, worked through all my stuff, and she was just so intense and motivated about helping vets. And she was working as a VFW caseworker,
Hmm.
for claims. Out of loyalty to her, I joined the VFW. I was
Okay.
like, if VFW is handling my claim and this is the type of people that are part of that organization, I'm all in. The least I could do is pay my dues, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
I've done that. I have to go to some meetings, but I'll tell you, like um, the community aspect of things, just because of some of the jobs that I've had since retiring.
Hmm.
I've been around Marines, been around sailors, been around a lot of service members still,
Yeah.
and it still keeps you, ticking and motivated, as well. So, community is a big deal. I would also say, um, if there was any piece of advice I'd give somebody who's getting out,
Hmm.
um, it kind of relates back to promotions, right? Sometimes when I see folks getting ready to go on promotion boards, they do really weird stuff. Like now they're cramming for some massive test, right? Like, oh, I've got to run faster. I got to do more pull-ups now because the board is this year.
Right.
Or
Yeah.
like, I've got to go to swim qual, even though I haven't done swim qual in like 13 years. I'm going to go do it right now because, that could be the main differentiator between me and somebody else, right?
Yeah.
I see people approaching retirement the same way. Like, I've got to cram right now, or
Yeah.
else my retirement's not going to be good. So the biggest piece of advice, you got to start preparing for retirement. I tell people, like, when you hit the 10-year mark and you realize you're going to 20,
Hmm.
start preparing for retirement, right? If
Yeah.
you're getting out, I don't care if it's a trade or a 4-year degree or a master's degree. The people who work hard on doing those things, um, you know, they don't have. I had not had a hard transition because I feel like I had been preparing for this for a bit. So
Right.
when I transitioned, I had a plan and I executed my plan just like I would any other military
Hmm.
event, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
I make a plan. My flash to bang for retirement is I figured out in October I wanted to retire, and then by June I had hung it up.
Yeah.
And then out of the military officially in October. So just figure out what your plan is and then execute your plan.
Yeah.
And if you've done the right things up to that point, you shouldn't be cramming for a test, right? Like all the things that you've done up to that point is going to translate some way.
Very true. Yeah. And for those young guys, like when I say or when I think about getting out ready, I'm getting ready to retire too. So, uh, luckily several years back, I started going to medical regularly and making sure that I'm documenting things and stuff like that. Like, I wish I would have done it a little earlier in my career, but I did not. And I am thankful for the stuff that I did get documented, because that made things way easier when I went to the VA and dealing with all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, hey, what is there anything else that you want to leave anybody with before we go ahead and wrap this up? But I want to open it up for you to talk about and say whatever it is that you want to say, words of wisdom, to give a shout out, whatever the case may be. This is your opportunity.
Yeah. I guess the biggest thing I would tell folks, my last, hurrah here is say thanks.
Mm-hmm.
I have had a lot of tremendous people in my career, and when it's almost like walking into a museum, like the National Hall of portrait gallery, right?
Yeah.
And if you walk into the National Portrait Gallery, there's just paintings of all these giants throughout our history, right,
Mm-hmm.
along the walls and stuff. And I kind of have one of those in my mind, of those giants that have kind of been in my career,
Yeah.
just instrumental figures. There's also like a dark, dingy alleyway of people who I don't want to emulate, right? That, you got to walk through every once in a while if you're about to make a decision to make sure you're not going to wind up in somebody else's dark, dingy alleyway.
Yeah.
But, for the most part, I spend my time in that massive hallway full of folks. And, as I was approaching retirement, some of them were not even Marines. Some of them were civilians. Some of them people had gotten me, out of high school.
Mm-hmm.
I think about my earth science teacher, my English teacher. They took a liking to me as I was getting ready to leave to go to boot camp. I wasn't doing well in their classes. My earth science teacher, he's like, hey, if you pass the Regent test, I'll give you whatever you pass the Regent test with at the end of the quarter.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, okay. So I passed that test. I appreciated him for that.
Yeah,
Because it
definitely.
allowed me to graduate high school on time. And I'd say the same with my English teacher. He knew I was joining the Marine Corps. And he provided me a book to do a report on that was about a World War II figure that had grown up in New York, and that also helped motivate me to kind of stay the course. But all of these people that come along your way, I would compare it to you as a leader or me as a leader, right? Every
Mm-hmm.
once in a while, out of the blue, I'll get a thank you note, right?
Yeah.
Somebody hit me up on like Instant Messenger or like Facebook or something like that. Hey, do you remember me? I remember everybody. Right? Do you remember me? Hey, thank you because this, and this. So I have done a really in my head, especially as I was approaching this year, to reach out to a lot of those folks who are like massive figures in my career, and just say, hey, thanks for taking the time to teach me how to drive. Right?
Yeah.
Thanks
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
taking
Yeah.
the time, to take me down to go enroll in college. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And goofy things like that, right? But it means a lot. I know it means a lot to me when I see, folks reach out and say thanks. So
Yeah.
I want to make sure I pay that forward by doing the same thing to folks who've meant a lot to me throughout my career.
Absolutely. Fantastic advice. You're full of good advice. I should have come to you more often and have you on the podcast more often. Hey,
My teenagers don't
Joe,
listen to my advice.
what's that?
My teenagers don't listen to my advice.
Well, it's a different thing when it's dad,
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, hey, I want to thank you for coming on. Thanks for walking us through your career. Thanks for giving us words of wisdom, and you've had some great nuggets in here, and I truly appreciate it. We'll have to get you back on another time, just to chit chat or something, and we'll get you on a fireside chat or something.
Awesome. This has been excellent. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and it's been good. Well, hey, thanks, and to everybody out there, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. And with that, stay motivated, change your socks.